Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in our discussion today. The Freethinking School is looking at hosting a series of Montessori expert talks to address the overarching theme, which is the relevance of the Montessori method in today's world. Today, we wish to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Preeti Patel, who's the head of education at Montessori Centre International, London. She holds the position as lead academic placement tutor for diploma and degree level programs at MCI. Preeti is particularly focused on offering integral experiences developed on-site through work practice and placement opportunities within training for student teachers and educators entering the field. Prior to this, Preeti worked as an early years educator and nursery manager for 15 long years in a Montessori daycare and nursery. Today, we draw upon her wide portfolio of Montessori experiences as an early years educator and as a teacher trainer to deliberate on the topic for the day, which is the adaptability of Montessori method in the face of the pandemic. But before we begin, may we request both Montessori practitioners and parents in the audience to feel free to post your questions in the chat box. We would be delighted to take them up at the end of the session. So we would begin now by asking Preeti, for the benefit of our audience, can you please tell us about the Montessori method and how it is an education for life?
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm really honored to be able to be the first speaker for your conferences. In Sandy's introduction, she said 15 very long years of being a Montessori educator. They were lovely 15 years, years that really sort of opened my eyes to Montessori education and how the Montessori method really supports children, not just, in early years, but really for life. And that is something I will be discussing with you today. I have prepared a little PowerPoint, so I'll share that with you just to sort of help guide the conversation today. But as Sandy mentioned, please feel free to post your questions if you have any in the chat box, and we'll try and address them at the end of the discussion. Thank you. Okay, so the remit I got from Sandy was to talk about the relevance of the Montessori method in today's world. And I thought that was a really interesting question to pose, because the Montessori method, as it is, has been around for more than 100 years. So how can something that originated 100+ years ago really be relevant in today's world? And I hope by the end of the time that we have today, you will begin to see what the relevance of Montessori is in today's world. To start off with, I'll just give you a little bit of background about Dr. Maria Montessori for those who are not familiar with her. Dr. Maria Montessori was born in the province of Ancona in Italy on the 31st of August in 1817. So had she been alive, she would have just had her birthday. She was the first woman doctor in Italy, and she founded the Casa di Bambini School in Rome. She started her teacher training program all over the world, and she died in 1952 in the Netherlands. So the Montessori method, or her teacher training, was not just specific to Italy. And in fact, she spent a great deal of time in India. So what really is the Montessori method? The Montessori approach is holistic and aims to develop the whole child. Fundamental to the approach is the belief that a child's early years, from birth to 6, are the period when they have the greatest capacity to learn. Maria Montessori saw that children learn best by doing, and that happy, self-motivated learners form positive images of themselves as confident, successful people. She created specially designed environments, including resources to foster independence and a love for learning from an early age. And she left a legacy through her work that combines the philosophy of freedom and self-development for children with a practical approach. She very much advocated supporting the child as active learners, respecting the inner life of the child, and trusting the child's inner motivation by providing freedom within limits, and this thereby encouraging the child's inner discipline. So starting from the really core principle of what we must meet the needs of the child, the Montessori method evolved from answering two follow-up questions. But the first question was, what are the needs of the child and how can we best meet them? So whilst we're thinking about this, I'd really like you, whilst you're listening to this, to really think about, what are the needs of the children today? Have they changed over time? And how can we best meet the needs of children? As far as Maria Montessori was concerned, her answer to both questions came about not from an educationalist view, but from a scientific standpoint. Science was her background, and that's what she knew best. To her, the needs of the child could be discerned through observing the child. Her observations began with the first children she worked with, and taken together what she had learned through studying others, so other educationalists. And this allowed her to understand more of the natural qualities and needs of a child. So what really sets the Montessori method apart from many other educational approaches? What makes it both attractive across the globe and applicable to every child? These may be questions that you're thinking about. And there are several ways to answer these questions. And advocates of the Montessori method will often have different thoughts about the various aspects of the approach. But I think it's perhaps best to begin with that one single core principle of following the child and understanding the needs of the child and meeting the needs of the child. Whilst this may sound obvious, there is both a great depth to this principle and it is very recognizable when it is absent. The method that Dr. Maria Montessori developed was wholly for the benefit of the child. She made clear through that by allowing children to develop naturally, to be supported fully, and to have their needs met and understood, society itself will benefit. Now, if that doesn't really answer our question today, so how is it relevant in the world of today, then I don't know what really will. Okay, what did Maria Montessori really do then to meet the needs of the children? So not being a trained teacher, she did not look to teach, but she watched and listened to what the children showed and told her. If they showed an interest, she would follow it up. She saw that there were two other factors alongside the child themselves that influence development. And these were the environment that the child was in and the adult who was supporting the child. The adult who was creating the environment and sharing it with the child. Now that can be both the educator or it could be the parent or the carer. Now these relationships between these three factors are what can truly enable the true nature of the child to shine. So observation is a key part to all of this. So if we are to understand what the needs of the children are, we need to observe. Now, as educators, the main reason we observe children is to see if they're following a general pattern, whilst keeping in mind that children develop at different paces and at their own paces, really, so that we can understand how they learn, what their interests are. And this helps us to build upon their knowledge and interests by providing stimulating resources in line with the stage of development they have reached and their needs. By careful observation of the children's learning, it can help us improve the environments that we provide. We can utilize what we observe to identify their strengths, areas for development, gaps and inconsistencies in the provision, and truly follow the child. Whilst we do that already in Montessori environments in the classrooms, is this something we can do within the home environment? Absolutely. And I hope as we go through the presentation, you will begin to see how this might be possible for you at home as well, for those of you who are parents who have joined us today. So following the child, that's a term that is used quite a lot with Montessori educators. But what does it really mean? The phrase follow the child does not mean that you let the child do whatever they want, or literally just walking behind the child and following them, but rather it's an acknowledgement that the child has their own pattern. The key to understanding this idea is, again, observation. Now, as Montessori educators and practitioners will know, that we constantly observe the child within the classroom environment. We We pay careful attention to their interests and the activities to which they're naturally drawn, and we monitor their understanding and development of skills. We then use this ability as our guide to then moving them forward. But this is something we as parents can do very much. I am a Montessori educator, but I'm also a Montessori parent. And that's something that is sort of integral to what I did in terms of supporting my children. So I was constantly observing my children as a mother, but also sort of stepping back sometimes and just observing what their interests were. I mean, I think sometimes when we observe sort of as parents, we get sort of very emotionally tangled in our observations. We start to, you know, sort of see we revel in the things that they are doing, but we also sort of are a little bit critical of what they're not being able to do, without really understanding that, you know, children progress at their own rate and that they will, you know, reach those levels of development as and when they're ready, really. You know, if you have any parent that has twins will also know that no two twins are the same. So having an expectation that children of a particular age will all develop at the same rate and at the same rate, you know, stage, and reach the same stages of development is something that we really need to understand does not happen. You know, children go through the phases of development at their pace and will reach those stages of development as and when they're ready. Our role as the parent and the educator is very much about providing and facilitating that journey, as it were, making sure that their environment is really suitable for that development to take place, and how we can sort of support and guide them in that process. Now, as Montessori educators, you know, we take into account where each child is during at a specific time, rather than imposing our ideas about what the child should be learning at that time. So if a child needs more time in a particular area, we give them freedom to have that time, to really sort of internalize that concept or idea or skill. And if once they've mastered that skill or concept, we give them the opportunity to learn more about the concept through extensions, and we present them with more complex work related to that, so that they're able to build upon that knowledge of that particular concept. Now, from our observations, we're also able to follow the child and determine their needs. Now, one thing that really sort of struck me when I was reading Maria Montessori's work was she stated, follow the child, but follow the child as his leader. So be mindful of what the child needs. So provide the opportunities for them to learn, to grow and develop in a safe and carefully prepared environment. And the environment that I sort of am talking about is created with that particular child in mind, considering both his or her current developmental needs and their future needs. We respect the child and their natural progression, honoring their spirit and their independence. Now, the freedoms that I was sort of mentioning are, you know, freedoms that we need to offer children within boundaries. So one of the misconceptions or myths around Montessori is that children are allowed to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do, however they want to do. And to a certain extent, that's true. However, all the freedoms that are facilitated to children or you know, made available to the children come with boundaries. So children have very, very clear set boundaries that are introduced to them right at the very beginning, and then those freedoms are made available to them. Now, offering those freedoms within limits provides a comfortable balance between an overly structured environment and a chaotic one. So if we had children doing anything and everything that they wanted whenever they wanted, we'd have chaos. And where we have that structure whereby children are regimented into doing certain things at certain times, that just sort of does not allow any sort of flexibility or independence of thought at all, you know. So it's really key that we offer a balance between the two. So what does the term freedom within limits really means? It means setting clear expectations and ground rules ahead of time and following through. It means making and sticking to flexible routines. So yes, you have routines, but there should be a little bit of flexibility within it. It means that a secure, loving and trusting relationship is developed between the child and the adult. It also means providing age-appropriate choices and opportunities for self-mastery and independence. So things like freedom of choice, for example. You don't just sort of say, right, children, do whatever you want to do, choose whatever you want to do. Now, age-appropriate choices are great. So if you're working with a toddler or you have a toddler at home, maybe giving them a couple of simple choices. Would you like to wear your red jumper or your green jumper? Would you like to have an apple or banana for snack, for example? So you're giving them a choice, but they're making those decisions within that. However, if you said to them, do you want an apple, a banana, satsuma, and a strawberry, that would just be too complicated for the children. So thinking about those sort of things is really important. Freedom of movement is really, really vital for the growth and development of children. So thinking about how you can facilitate that. So freedom of movement, both within an internal environment as well as an external environment. So how accessible is the layout of your home? Are children able to move from room to room? Are they able to go outside and access the outdoor space that you may have? And the same applies to the children within the nursery setting or the early years setting. Do the children have that freedom of movement to learn outside or to work inside should they wish to do that? Freedom from repetition. As an educator, when I was sort of working with children in the nursery, parents would often come to me and say, my child keeps on doing the same thing again and again and again and again. And I would say, fantastic, wonderful, let them do it. And they would sort of look at me with surprise and say, but surely, I should be offering them something else. They should be doing something else. But it is through repetition that children finesse a skill. Now, if you think about a recipe that you have recently used to cook something, the very first time you follow a recipe, you'll go through the process, you'll make it, and you'll sort of think, okay, maybe I should have tweaked this, maybe I could have added this. The next time you make it, you'll have made some variation to it and some change will come through. The more you make that recipe and make it your own, that's repetition, right? The more you do it, the more skilled you become at doing it. And soon you don't need that recipe at all. And you're just doing it because you have really internalized what that recipe is. In the same way, children's skills, whatever they may be, are being internalized and refined as they do repeat them again and again. So for example, if you think about your child, starting to walk, for example, they constantly will start that walking process. They will fall down, they will start again, they will fall down, they'll start again until they're walking properly. Or when they start climbing or crawling up those stairs, which, have driven every parent to have gray hair, I'm sure, because you're worried about them falling down those stairs. But that movement of wanting to crawl up and down those stairs as many times as they want to really hone that skill is really important. So repetition is a key way for children to learn. So if your child is repeating things, please facilitate that, encourage that, because they're really honing a skill. Freedom to socialize or not socialize. Now that's a key thing at the moment. The pandemic has caused, a huge amount of impact on our social lives, both as adults and children. And many children this year have not had an opportunity to be able to socialize with children of their own age, for example. And I know as sort of restrictions are beginning to ease in many countries, hopefully, to stay, parents are beginning to think about how do we ensure and encourage that socialization to take place? How do I provide those opportunities for children to meet other children? Because that's a key part of our growth and our development as human beings. Now, one of the key things I think it's important to remember is that do not pressurize your children into social environments. Don't book their day solid with social engagements so that they're having to go from one thing to another to another. Children need time to process. They need time to reflect. They need time to really consolidate what's happening. And like us, sometimes they don't want to engage in a social environment, and sometimes they're really happy to do that. So please take your cues from your children. A tired child is not a social child. So be mindful of, what stage they're at, and if they're needing to have a break, they're needing to have a rest. I know when I certainly started sort of working less from home and going out more, after a year of working constantly at home, it was really difficult, having to think about those social skills that we need in terms of engagement. And if we think about our children, they haven't developed those. They're still at that stage where they're developing those. So be mindful of that. Of course, provide them with the opportunities, but don't overwhelm them. So that one really helped them. Now, freedom to play. Oh, I can't say enough about that. Freedom to play is so, so vital. And again, a misconception around Montessori is that children are not allowed to play. They always have to work. And really, that's not true. Children learn through play, and a child's work is their play. And we really have to acknowledge that and really understand the importance of this. It is through play that children will learn, so provide them with those opportunities to really engage, in their play. Be involved in their play if they invite you to be there, but don't take over their play. As adults, I think we're sometimes really guilty of guiding children's play because we think we know best. But sometimes it's best to just step back and see what your child is doing, how they're playing, whether they want you to be involved in it or not. Take their cues from them. Now, the freedom to contemplate. That's a big one. What do children need to contemplate about? Now, they are learning so many new skills, and they need to process those. So they need that quiet time. Children do not need to be constantly doing something. They need that quiet time to really recognize and process and think about the skills that they have learned. So if you find your child just wandering around or just sitting quietly somewhere, then be. Of course, keep an eye on them, just make sure they're not sort of ailing for something, but keep a close eye, but let them be, so because that will be really that opportunity for them to process the things they're learning. Freedom to make decisions. That's a hard one, isn't it? As adults, we want to be making decisions for our children. But children need to make decisions. How are they going to develop that skill if we do not provide them with those opportunities to make those decisions? Sometimes to get them right and sometimes to get them wrong. And it's important that we let children make mistakes, to fail, because it's through that they will really learn. We don't highlight the fact that they've made a mistake or they failed at something, but the child will realize that for themselves. But it's important that they learn through that process. If you think of those times when you as an adult or as a child was doing something, what do you remember the most? Was it those things that you got right the first time, or those things that you really had to work at? For me, it's always been the things I've really had to work at. I still retain that. The things I got or was shown to me and told to me, I've forgotten those. They're not important to me. But the things that I really had to work at are still very, very important to me. So let them make decisions, rightly or wrongly. That's a skill we need as adults. So really important to think about that. The freedom of expression is really important as well, allowing children to express themselves in whichever way that they feel most comfortable with. Now, if we allow the children to have all of the freedoms that I've just mentioned, these will support the natural traits that every child has. A trait for great concentration. Children can concentrate for long, long periods of time if they have the opportunity to do that. So make sure the environment that you're offering to the child, whether it's at in an educational environment or whether it's at home, you're ensuring that they have a time, uninterrupted time. And that's quite a challenge for us, isn't it? Providing that uninterrupted time for great concentration to take place. It takes time for children to process things, to really understand things. So it's really important that we give them that freedom of time, which is uninterrupted. And interruptions can be something as a smile, by asking them how they are, by asking them what they're doing. So it could be the simple things to, it's tidy up time, it's lunch time, it's all those other things that, oh, it's music time, or whatever else that's happening in the environment. Okay, so be mindful of that. there's a real sense of dignity. That's a natural trait. So giving that dignity to the child is really important. Children generally will have a tendency to go towards more apparatus over traditional toys. So provide them with those opportunities. Allow them that opportunity for repetition. And this in turn will sort of help develop that self-discipline for children. There's no need for rewards or punishments. And I think that's something a lot of people find quite challenging with Montessori education, that need to praise children. Now, if you watch children, they don't need us to constantly tell them that they're a good boy or a good girl, or well done for doing something, or I'm going to give you a star or a sticker or a chart for doing something. If you really watch and observe them, the fact that they have managed to do something for themselves, all by themselves, is enough of a reward. And punishing children doesn't really achieve anything. It's more about discussing with children how things could be done differently. That's more important. So, if a child has done something that is inappropriate, rather than punishing them in whatever punishment that you think is appropriate, sit down with them and discuss why that happened. And you'll be surprised that even children as young as 2 will be able to respond to that. Now, children have an internal love of order, and you might see that in some of the things that they're doing. So as they're beginning to grow and develop some of the skills that they have, you might see them ordering things. They have a love for putting things in order. And in the same way that they have that external need for order, they also have that internal need for order. So it's we can sort of facilitate and support that by providing environments that are ordered. And again, I don't mean regimented in any way, but ordered in a way that the children can access those things. Now, these natural traits that are within children together will guide the routines, the organization, and interactions that children have, both within the educational environment or your home. Now, Maria Montessori was one of the first educators to realize the importance of independence and its connection to self-esteem. She realized that this is a real need in children, and hereby she stressed that every activity and every routine in the nursery should have independence of action and thought as its motive. Because when a child can independently do something for themselves without needing anybody else to do it, or being able to ask for help if they need it, then this develops their confidence and their self-esteem. These are 2 really important elements that we have to have as human beings. If we are to develop children and adults who are confident, we have to ensure that they have a high self-esteem. And that can only happen if we encourage independence from a really, really young age. So any environment that you create for the children, whether it's at home or whether it's in the educational environment, please ensure that it's rich in motives which lend interest to activity and invite the child to conduct his or her own experiences. So with this in mind, never help a child with a task that he or she feels that they can succeed in. So you'll have seen with your toddlers, they will always say to you, I want to, me do it. They want to try. And what do we do as adults? No, I'll do it. It's much quicker. Or we have help at home who will help support that process. Now, if we continually do that for children, they will become dependent on other people doing things for them. And then as they grow into adults, we sort of say, oh, they don't do these things. Why don't they do these things? And we'll have to reflect back to what we'd offered to them as children. Did we offer them opportunities to be independent? Did we offer them that opportunity to give them that gift, as it were, to be able to really have that independence? And independence is a real gift. And I can't stress that enough. Okay. So giving the child the gift of independence lets them know that we value them and we know that they're capable. Now, of course, trying to tell a child to put their shoes on 2 minutes before you're about to leave may not give them that independence, because children can't do things very, very quickly. So you might have to plan this independence a little bit. So be mindful of this when you're sort of planning, your day. So if you need to go outside at sort of 9:30 in the morning, then tell your child at 9 o'clock, it's time to get ready, so that they have ample time to be able to put their shoes on, their coat on, gather their things. So you're not rushing them out of the door at sort of 2 minutes to 9:30. So time is really, really important. Now, if we give them that independence, children can grow up feeling empowered and really confident in their abilities and skills of making sound choices. When we trust them, they learn to trust themselves. And that's really important. Trusting yourself is really important, because it is trust in yourself that ultimately helps you become happy and productive members of your community. Of course, this will look different at different ages. Children from the age of from birth to 6 want to do things by themselves, whilst children sort of at elementary level or primary level want to think for themselves. And adolescents, or our teenagers, both want both physical and social independence, whilst they tread that tricky time between sort of childhood and adulthood. And it's really important to remind ourselves of these developmental stages, both as teachers and as parents. Even the earliest years at school, children need to focus on what we in the classroom refer as practical life skills. These may include learning to prepare simple snacks, or putting on their own shoes or coats, or caring for the classroom, plants and animals. So it's a range of activities, but children are given endless opportunities to practice these skills. Another facet of independence at the Montessori school involves choice within limits, as I mentioned. Children are able to decide what work they're interested in. So teachers will prepare a very beautiful, carefully prepared environment, so that all the choices within that environment are safe and desirable. And within those boundaries, children are free to explore. This will help a child really sort of embed those skills of independence. So never ever support a child or help a child with a task that they feel that they can succeed. Again, just think of those opportunities, and I can think of many myself, of when I wanted to do something, but there was always an adult going, no, let me show you how to do it. And I'm going, but I want to try, I really want to do it. And those opportunities were not made available. How did you feel at that time? Either as a child or even as an adult? Those are exactly the same feelings that a child will be going through. So do be mindful of that as you sort of help them as they grow, in their growth. Another thing we hear about is it's all about order in a Montessori environment, and it absolutely is. Because brain research shows that during the first 6 years of life, the neural matter of the brain is growing at a tremendous rate. The brain creates neural pathways with the sensory information that it's acquiring. Children develop an innate need for order during this time, and they thrive with routine and predictability throughout their childhood. But children in the sensitive period for order don't just benefit from order, they demand it. They want it. So Montessori classrooms prepare for this period by decreasing the disorder and maximizing the order, by offering carefully designed, reliable routines, from the way the individual lessons are sequenced on the shelf to the precision of the child's hand during a presentation. The classification of objects and experiences in the child's environments are also forming. So making connections of similar qualities amongst objects is an important skill for adult thinking. Examples of the type of classifications that the children are making are as follows. For example, these are wooden objects. These are all the items we need to bake a cake. These are the materials we need to build a house. So this ordered thinking really helps with critical thinking. So when we think about those adults who lack critical thinking, those adults also don't have the ability to classify objects effectively. So it's really important that if we want our adults to be critical thinkers, or our children as adults to be critical thinkers, we need to give them that opportunity for classification. Also, it's the child's innate sense for finding and creating order that later that helps them build later logical thinking, which they will need not just for education, but for life as well. So it's all about practical skills. Well, what do they achieve? So when taken seriously and presented as an approachable, impactful challenge, these activities hold inherent dignity. It's not just getting dressed or just juicing an orange if one is doing it oneself. The child is learning to follow a complex motor sequence independently in order to fulfill his or her own needs and desires. So these skills, when taught early in life, allow children to believe in themselves, as well as develop self-discipline needed for success throughout their lives. So the practical life element of the Montessori curriculum teaches the children things that they need to and are motivated to learn anyway, and does it in a way that is that is in line with more sort of academic disciplines, developing the same key functional, executive, and emotional skills. So things like maths, reading, and language all require one to have the ability to focus, to be able to follow logical and sequential steps, to make independent choices and intelligent choices, to see a task through from start to finish, to persist when one makes a mistake, and to correct one's mistakes. And all of these are present in the process of learning and practicing the practical life activities. The multiple layers of these activities, there are multiple layers to these activities, and they may seem straightforward and repetitive to us as adults, but a lot is going on under the surface. So in doing practical life activities, the child can develop a high level of concentration, develop a sense of order, take pride in completing a job, developing respect for his or her community and surroundings, increasing their independence, and improving fine motor skills, both in general and with an eye to a particular skill that the child will need more cognitively, for more cognitively demanding work, such as reading and writing and mathematics later on. So when you're presenting that pouring from jug to jug or transferring something, there is much more to it than just what they are learning. And I use that word just really, really loosely. So the key thing is help me to help myself. And as I said, the key factor for this is really the freedoms that I mentioned earlier. So the importance of the favorable environment. Why do we talk about having a favorable environment, and what does it really mean? The favorable environment is all about creating a space for the children, an organized space, which will be accessible to the child. So things need to be at the children's height. They need to be where they can reach them and access them. They need to be where they don't have to ask you as the adult to give it to them. So when you're creating spaces for your children, whether it is at home or whether it is within the educational environment, really think about what that space looks like. Because when you think about the importance of the environment, as a teacher, as an educator, as a parent, you're showing respect to the child through the care and preparation that you're putting into it. And this helps with the child's emotional stability, it reduces anxiety, it adapts to the children within the environment. So when you go and visit Montessori environments, they shouldn't all look the same. They should really be there supporting the children within that environment. Now, how you organize your environment will, of course, in some part be dictated by the physical boundaries that you're working with. So the doors, walls, windows, heating fixtures or cooling fixtures are unlikely to be movable. But the position of everything else is up to you. So when you go into your room or the room that you're creating for the child, Imagine it from the child's perspective. And the first thing to do is to get down on your knees and really see it from their height. And you'll be surprised at the things that you see. Try and create environments that are not too distracting. So you shouldn't be using very sort of bright colors necessarily in the environment. Try to go for those muted colors and then bring in accents of colors with the accessories that you have. But don't have too much up on the walls that are distracting to the children. So nice sort of neutral walls with beautiful paintings, natural flowers, plants, natural wood in the environment. All of those are really great things to have within a child's environment. Looking at this picture that I've put in here, looking at sort of little baskets that are accessible for that child. Those baskets contain lots of different activities or resources that the child can easily access and put back, more importantly. Because part of that process of being in that environment is not only being able to access it, but also caring for the environment. And that includes tidying up, which will be wonderful for most parents to hear, I'm sure. So get down to kneel on your knees. Look at the room at their level. Look at the eye line. Look at what is in line of your sight. How clear are the exits? Where are there spaces to spread out? Where are the spaces to curl up and be really cozy and comfortable? How easy is it to get to the toilet, the sink, or a snack, or a drink of water? Once you've had a really good look around, decide if you want to or can move away any of the furniture that might be in the way. When would be the best time to do it? And where possible, involve your child. Ask them where they'd like the things to be. They might want their sofa or their bed in a particular place. Think about it. So, large scale rearrangements can really disturb the consistency that the child has come to expect. So before doing anything major in your child's room or in the educational environment, discuss it with the children. Talk to them. Make them aware of the changes that are coming in place so it doesn't come as a surprise to them. Now, you must consider both the physical environment and the spiritual environment. Now, the spiritual environment is really difficult to quantify. However, when you go to a nursery or an educational organization, you will immediately get a sense of the atmosphere and an indication of the ethos by picking up on a myriad of clues that are available. So what are the children, how do the children look in that environment? Are they smiling? Are they engaged? Are they talking to each other? Or are they huddled up over their desk and just scribbling and not talking to anybody around them, not making eye contact with anybody? Now, some of these, as I say, some of these clues may be very overt, but a majority of them will be subtle. So it is in the way that the teacher talks to the children, in the way the adult engages with the environment, how they're supporting them, how they talk to each other. How do the adults in the environment talk to each other? How do they, support a group of children? How do they support an individual child? All of those things can be very, very subtle. But the construction of the spiritual environment is gradual and many layered. It is born of every interaction that the adult has with other people and the environment itself. How many, and more than any other component of the environment, it is the spiritual aspect that gives the strongest reflection of the character and qualities of the adult within it. So how is the adult showing respect to the child? How is the adult facilitating learning? How is the adult caring for the environment? Are they ensuring that it's beautifully kept? And by that, I don't mean, painted every 30 seconds or anything in terms to keep the beauty alive, but really making sure that, the resources are accessible, the resources are complete, the resources are clean, the environment is tidy, the environment is clean and loved, so that the child feels like they're the most important person within that environment. So how you treat the children, how you demonstrate your respect for them, and how you embody the privileged position that you hold as the guardian and guide of their young lives will be really visible. So it's really important to be mindful of that. It clearly and keenly reflects the trust and respect for the child, that freedom of movement, that responsibility and independence that is in place for the children. Now, how can this be reflected at home? So think about, the resources that you're providing your children. A limited but carefully selected number of toys and materials that are available to the child. Having a low cabinet with where you sort of lay these resources. An area where they can go and get their own snack when they're hungry. Using real crockery and cutlery with the children. Giving children choices, having things at their level, so a coat peg at their height, so they're able to hang their coats up, or take a little step or a stool where they can sit down and take their shoes off. Making sure that their cupboard, for example, has their clothes that are accessible to them, so that they can make the choices of what they want to wear and be able to take those out and change into whatever they wish to wear. Initially, some of those choices may be very interesting, and they might decide to wear, a myriad of clothing at any one time. But that's part of that growing process of finding their identity, finding who they are and how they express it. It's really, really important. So think about the small sort of options that you can give the children. Giving children options to choose a sequence of events rather than the event. For example, it's coming up to bedtime. Do you want to brush your teeth first, or do you want to have your bath first? Now, both are going to happen anyway, but which do you want to do first? If you've made a mess somewhere, do you want to clean it up yourself? Shall we do it together? How do you want to do it? So giving them a choice is always helpful. And this will help you deal with sort of any possible sort of tantrums or behavioral issues that might sort of crop up because children are not understanding why things are happening. So it's really important to keep children part of that process. So that brings us down to that big question that we started off with. What does Montessori offer the child of today? So Montessori education, or the Montessori method, really offers learning that is rooted in reality. The materials in the classroom are all real and have a purpose. Each and every activity that's in the classroom has a direct learning objective, while supporting a number of indirect objectives, which prepare the child not only for other areas of the curriculum, but for life itself. You will often hear Montessori educators not saying we're preparing children for school, but we're preparing children for life. Because if a child is prepared for life, then they're prepared for anything in life. So that's really important to think about. The children have concrete learning experiences so that the foundations for learning are laid before children move to abstract concepts. So we very much believe in that concrete learning experience, which is fundamental to laying the foundations of good, strong learning for the future. It's a bit like building a house. If you were building a house, you would really make sure your foundations were strong. Otherwise, your house is going to collapse around you. And in the same way, Montessori educators really focus on providing learning experience that build on the foundations for learning, rather than learning just for the sake of learning and rote learning. Okay. We have mixed age classrooms, so which we call as vertical grouping, where peer learning is encouraged as younger children learn from older peers through observation, and older peers solidify and consolidate their knowledge as they pass on this learning to their younger counterparts. This really helps them build leadership skills, independence, social responsibility, and self-awareness. Freedom within limits leads to the child being able to self-regulate. Really important. How is a child going to know what they need in terms of food, sleep, going to the toilet, etc., if we don't give them these opportunities for self-regulation? So that's really vital. Consistency and safety is really important within the Montessori environment. So the Montessori environment provides the child where they get opportunities to sort of develop intrinsic motivation or passion and be proactive in their own learning and development and in problem solving. Now, because children are given the opportunity to have that freedom to take initiatives, they grow into can-do people who are self-confident. There's never, I can't do it. They will always approach with, I'm going to give this a go. I can do it. And that's really important, having that can-do attitude. Now, the curriculum within the Montessori environments, usually an individualized curriculum. So one-to-one lessons are offered to each child depending on their level of developmental stage, level and needs. This way the child again develops that can-do, able-to-do attitude, which promotes and encourages them to try new things and challenges. It's possible because the practitioner observes children and determines the need and support that they require. And because all the children work independently, spending their day sort of practicing and perfecting the skills and knowledges, the skill and knowledge that they already have, then they can have that lesson on a one-to-one basis that will help them grow and build on that. The time and space. Rather than the day being broken down into sort of specific learning areas, for example, language or numeracy time or music time, children generally have 2 long periods of uninterrupted work during the day. And these are sort of 2 to 3 hours long, depending on the age of the children, so that the children have time to engage with the materials deeply and reach intense concentration. Now, when you read Maria Montessori's work, she refers to this time as the work cycle. And something we have sort of really advocating is for practitioners to look at that work cycle as the whole day. Because in many situations, children are now, right from a very early age, are with us for long periods of time. They're not just with us for 2 or 3 hours each day. They are sometimes with us up to 10 hours a day. They're sort of in creches or daycare facilities. So think of the entire day as that work cycle, so that the children can have their independent individual work cycles during that day. So that you're not sort of creating a time or space where only work is possible at a certain time. Really think of the day as an opportunity for children to do what they need to do when they need to do it, and for you to then think about how you fit in the other routines around it. So how does this method support children and families? So the Montessori environment provides children to develop, as I said, that intrinsic motivation, and they are proactive in their own learning and problem solving. And because children are able to make those choices and be able to act upon them, they really support not only the children, but families themselves. The adult provides the resources and materials to support the child's actions. There is an opportunity for children to have the freedom to try, to take a risk, but in a safe way. The environment is flexible, so it's possible to change your mind. It supports the emotional development of the children, so concentration within a working, buzzing classroom. You will see children focused and concentrating. It develops empathy, social responsibility, patience, and persistence. It develops accountability. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier when I showed you that picture of the environment where I said these little baskets where a child can take something out but also must return them, we refer to that as a cycle of activity, where a child makes a decision to work with something or play with or engage with something, goes and takes it from a particular place, a shelf or from the basket that you have provided. They work and engage with it, and then once they've finished working with it, they go and return it back to the shelf or the space that you've created for them. We refer to this as a cycle of activity because there is a beginning and an end to that cycle. This cycle of activity introduces accountability to children. Now you will notice in most Montessori environment, in terms of resources, there's only one of everything. That's not because Montessori educators can't provide more than one of that item, but it's because we want children to understand that there is a process that needs to be completed. So before another child can select an activity from the shelf, it needs to be returned back there so other children can make choices. So this introduces turn taking for children in a very subtle way. So children understand they need to wait before they can access everything. It's sort of very different from the kind of world where we are in at the moment, where everything is instantaneous. Waiting is a real skill. So we introduce it to the children in a very, very subtle way. Sharing or not sharing, as the case may be. Now, of course, we want our children to be able to share things, but we don't want to make them share it by us dictating it. So if children want to share something, it should come from their internal motivation. They will want to share something. So by providing one of everything, we sort of encourage not only the turn taking, but also opportunities for children to make decisions on when they wish to share something, or to be able to say no thank you in a very polite way. This is my work and I'd like to work with it on my own. So great skills that are required for life. The other thing that really is supported is time management. So as the children sort of work through the curriculum, they decide how long they're going to spend on something, what else they need to do. So we're already introducing those opportunities for learning time management, for example. Organizational skills. Who doesn't need those? Where do the children want to work? How do they want to work? How long do they wish to work? And with whom do they wish to work? All important considerations. They learn to work cooperatively, so working together, observing, mentoring each other, supporting each other, collaborating as they work through the curriculum. Communication skills, really important. Children develop, So children develop those communication skills with each other through leadership roles in the classroom, the care of the environment, planning special activities and trips, presenting research to peers, and public speaking opportunities all nurture a sense of confidence and positive self-regard. Communication skills in collaboration, in presentation, and in conflict resolution are developed through daily experiences in these situations. Nurturing imagination allows, the opportunities that the child has within the environment allows for creative thinking that is necessary to be innovative. So you will find sort of a number of resources in the classroom, but we really encourage children to be imaginative and resourceful with those resources that we have, because it's not just one way of using particular materials. You can use materials in a myriad of ways, and it's necessary to allow those opportunities to happen because it nurtures imagination. It allows children to be innovative. It allows children to think outside of the box. I have a really wonderful experience that I'd like to share with you at this point. I remember very early on in my career, so this is going back a good 20 plus years now. I was in the classroom with my group of children, and I had a little boy in my classroom who was really interested in maps. He'd sort of been traveling with his family recently, and he'd come back, ready to share all this wonderful information with everyone. And we started talking about the country that he'd visited. So we were looking at the maps, and he said to me, Preeti, I'd really like to make a map of my own. And I thought, okay, that's great. So I said to him, well, what would you like? What do you think we need to make a map? So he said, well, I need a really big piece of paper. So I said, okay. So we went off to the art supplies, and we found a really, really big piece of paper. So he took that piece of paper, he laid it out on the table, he got out one of the flat maps that we had in the classroom, and he started sort of creating his own map. And I saw him sort of painting, and I saw him coloring, and really engrossed. So this was sort of an hour and a half into this activity. He came up to me and he said, I've got a problem. I said to him, why have you got a problem? What's wrong? And he said, I can't put Antarctica on the map. I said, why can't you put Antarctica on the map? And he said to me, on the map, Preeti, it's white. And I said, yes. And he said, and you've given me a white paper. How can I put white on white? And so I said to him, well, I don't know. Let's have a think. What do you think we could do? So we sort of sat there, talking about different options. And then he suddenly jumped out of his seat and he said, I know. And he went off to the art supplies and he found a basket of cotton wool. And he said, look, I can glue this on and we can still see Antarctica. So he was sort of sitting there, literally critically thinking out of the box as to how he was going to create Antarctica. Anyway, he created this beautiful map, and that map led to him sort of talking about sort of animals around the world. This piqued the interest of the children, the rest of the children in the classroom, who were fascinated with what was happening. And before we knew it, we had this whole project where everybody wanted to make a map and everybody wanted to talk about the world and the animals and the cultures. And we This just became a project that went on for 3 months. And this started from a conversation that I had with a child about making a map who couldn't put Antarctica on it. And it's those moments where you sort of really see how children can really solve their own problems and get a ball rolling in many different ways. Now, all of these skills that I've talked about are skills for success, and these will serve children throughout their lives in whatever path or direction that they follow. These skills are always important, but they're especially important in the times that we are now. We really need to support children with these. So some of the key elements that we can that we have in a Montessori classroom, which can be reflected in the home, are vertical grouping. I'm sure you're doing that already. If you have children of different ages in your home, you're doing vertical grouping. Lots of space for the children to work. Please don't try and clutter their spaces and fill their spaces up with furniture and resources. Give them lots of space. Give them access to outdoors. Ideally a free flow of learning. So I'm sure, in your homes, if you are able to, please just open up the doors to the garden. Of course, make sure, you have all your safety requirements in place and that you are checking the environment, but just make sure that they have access to the indoor and outdoor space all of the time. Order, it's a really important part. So activities or their resources should be organized in a meaningful way. Now, in the classroom, they're normally sort of organized into areas of learning, but at home, think about how they are meaningful for the child. Minimal wall display. So please don't put too many bright things up on the wall. They're too distracting for the children. When you're purchasing things for the children, don't buy lots and lots. Buy a few good, well-made materials. Bring in nature. So bring in plants, bring in animals, etc. And use real life objects. Use the glass, use the pottery, use those beautiful materials you can find, and you'll be surprised at how beautifully the children look after them. They're so, so careful with them. And to end, it's really important, and to sort of finish on this quote, we do not see him as the helpless little creature lying with folded arms and outstretched body in his weakness. We see the figure of the child who stands before us with his arms open, beckoning humanity to follow. This is our child of today and the adult of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Preeti. That was wonderful insight on the Montessori method, the beauty of the philosophy, and how it really helps the child to be confident and develop all these characteristics that are so integral to human beings, So, that was a lovely presentation, and I'm thinking that parents also would be really benefited by your pointers on how they can, remodel their homes to cater to the needs of the children, to go down on their knees. That is really, really important, to see things at their level, not only physically, but in so many dimensions. We need to really stoop down low to understand, that was lovely.
Absolutely. And sometimes as an adult, we find that quite challenging.
Yeah.
Because, as the adult, we feel we need to be in control, and giving up that control can be quite difficult. But it has a beauty, a real beauty in giving up that control. And it provides so many opportunities for the children.
So that it's really a very fine balance, like you said in the beginning, that you need to lead, to follow the child. You need to be the leader on one hand, but on the other hand, you need to be humble enough to understand that your child is capable of so much more and has that potential. So it's a lovely balance, between the two. Thank you so much, Preeti, for that understanding of the method and how we need to cater to the child who is at home now, because of the pandemic, and how we can bring this method to them in the best way that we can, even as parents and especially as educators, to rethink this whole method, to offer it even while they are at home.
Absolutely. I think the key thing is not to try and create an educational environment at home, but to truly enjoy your children and the time with them, because that's the most important thing, that communication, that one-to-one engagement with your child. which I'm sure every parent is offering their children, but being really mindful of what you're offering them in that time is the key thing. And, you know, you have amazing children as a result of that.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback from parents saying that, we now understand, our children at a different level. We never knew that they could do all this, and they're just fascinated by their own child now as a result.
Children will never cease to surprise us. That's the beauty of it. Every child is different. Every child is unique. Every child is amazing. So please, yeah, give them that opportunity to really develop in that way.
So thank you so much, Preeti, for those insights. It was wonderful having you with us today.
Real pleasure.
I'm sure our audience has benefited from it. And the Free Thinking School is really happy to collaborate with MCI. And we're looking forward to more interactions such as these in the times ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining in. Do catch up with us on a later date to find out our other series of talks that we have in line for you. Thank you very much for joining in once again. Goodbye.